Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 playthrough of the New York Yankees. And this is just going to be a mini series. Not sure how many seasons we're going to get in, but it does give me an opportunity to play with the team that I have rooted for since I was a wee little lad. I know some of you have much more negative views on the Yankees than I do, and I do appreciate you still watching and commenting. I really appreciate all of the responses and enthusiasm to this episode and the OOTP 25 and OOTP 24 stuff I've been putting out over the last few weeks. Definitely makes it gratifying that some of you enjoy and appreciate what we're putting out, and sincerely appreciate you taking the time to let me know that. So we are beginning this offseason with the Yankees. It was not a great year on the field in 2024, 84 and 78, so only a two-game improvement from a year ago. We were actually in a good battle with Toronto and Baltimore throughout most of the season. And then around mid-August into September, you can see we just plummeted in the standings and went from looking like we had a pretty good shot at making the playoffs to missing the playoffs for a second consecutive season, which is certainly not what you want to do when you are the New York Yankees. But we are trying to fix that. We've made a number of decisions here in these first couple weeks of the off season. Still haven't gotten to arbitration hearings. We're closing in on those in less than a week, and then free agency will happen shortly thereafter. We did have the issue that our scout retired right when the off season began, so we had to scramble to bring a new scout on board. We've rescouted our entire team just so we know better exactly what we are dealing with as we try to make a lot of decisions. Our scouting around the league is very spotty at this point. Someone brought up in the comments, and apologies that I can't remember who it was. I've also been having some trouble with the comments, so if you left me a comment that I haven't responded to, apologies for that. Usually try to respond to most comments out there, but I've been having some issues, and then I feel like I find a comment, respond to it, and then I can't find it again. But I am not the most technical person in the world necessarily. But anyways, the point was brought up that there was some comment, I think, on the Reddit message boards that it looks like you don't lose all of your scouting knowledge when the scouts leave this year. So I'm looking at the free agents right now, and you can see set to our new scouting director. We do have some knowledge of these players. It's not the very high that I like to see across the board, but there is a little bit of knowledge out there. But when I did have the situation where there was no scout on board right after the season finished, when I clicked on my players, of course, that meant that I had no information for them. So still not sure. It sounds like it might be a little better than it was before. It's something I've railed against, that you lose all of your scouting information and you're kind of flying blind when people retire or leave. And it seems like that might have been alleviated a bit. But unfortunately, I didn't know about this until I had already hired a new scout and started moving on. So going a little bit by memory here. Thinking about what we've done since the last episode, I mentioned Oppenheimer retired. Fortunately, just 6 days later, we hired Gary Bluen to replace him. Not perfect, but he's excellent at the majors, outstanding with internationals, and good with the minors and amateurs, and he's also a highly favored tools guy. So hopefully he'll build up some good knowledge for us over the years. We did void three options. We had a $17 million option on Anthony Rizzo that we voided. He had 24 homers and 78 ribbies for us, but only an 85 WRC plus. As much as he's a good influence in the clubhouse, 17 million seemed high, and you can see he's only looking for $2 million right now. So that was a very good decision that we got rid of that contract. We also voided the $5 million option for Lou Trevino, kind of view him as a replacement level type guy. That was such big money. And then Lou Weaver only was a $2.5 million contract, but he's coming off of a ruptured UCL, going to be out 8 months, and is also a replacement-ish level guy. So that's another $7.5 million that we've cleared up. And then we made another trade, or actually it's, I guess, our first trade of the offseason. We're thinking about some other trades. We traded away Luis Heel, who we didn't view as a big part of our organization going forward. I just really struggle with guys with low control. I know 40 can be doable at times, and he was certainly respectable this past season, but he was still below replacement level on a guaranteed major league contract. So I didn't mind giving him up. Ian Hamilton, a similar situation, another guy who was on our team last year, pretty poor control, walked 35 batters in 62 and a third innings. Another guy on a guaranteed major league contract if we kept him around. We included Rock Riggio, kind of borderline prospect. And then we did include Nestor Cortez. This one is probably a bit more controversial, potentially. Been a good pitcher for the Yankees for the past several seasons when he's been healthy. Set to make next year around $5 million. He's going to be out until probably late in spring training with shoulder inflammation. And he's also a guy that just allows a lot of home runs, extreme fly ball tendencies, doesn't throw very hard. Coming off of another injury, I just don't think he's going to age pretty well. So it's going to open up certainly a hole in our rotation, but with perhaps some of the money that we saved by moving on from Rizzo, Weaver, and Trevino, we can find somebody on the free agent market. And we did get a pitcher that I'm a little happier to start building around in return in the left-handed pitcher, Andrew Nardi. You can see we only have average scouting accuracy on him, but he's a 26-year-old who's had 2 consecutive very nice seasons working out of the bullpen for the Marlins. He's going to be real tough on lefties with that excellent stuff against lefties, and gives us, following up the trade that we made during the season for Mr. Rogers, 2 lefties that we really like out of our bullpen. So another guy that I feel more comfortable building around for the long term rather than these guys like Heel and Hamilton who were working in our bullpen, but I really didn't have a lot of confidence with and was going to be replacing now or sometime in the not so distant future. So decided to just make those moves now. We have made offers in arbitration to several players, bringing back Clark Schmidt, who will be in the rotation, and then Trent Grisham is going to come back as our center fielder next year. Love his defense. He did hit 20 homers for us. The left-handed bat in Yankee Stadium probably helped a bit. That said, he was still a below-average offensive player, batted just .203 with a 94 WRC+. But with his good glove and kind of looking at what the potential options might be on the free agent market, figured it made sense to bring him back. It looks like Cody Bellinger may be out there again. If he is, and we have to slide Grisham into more of a defensive substitute role, 4th outfielder kind of role, because we're able to lock down someone like Bellinger, I don't think it's the end of the world. It's just a 1-year commitment for next year. And at this point, with the moves that we have made, you can see we've started to open up a little bit of money. Now, the issue is that we do have a fair amount of holes to fill because I want to start changing this team. One other issue that I'll just talk about now, since I'm trying to learn the new game and share things with some of you about the new game that I've seen that look odd or different in case you might know the answers, or in case anyone from OOTP is watching. Not that I think they frequently watch this stuff, but I know once or twice over the course of all the episodes we've put out, I've gotten comments from some of the folks there. So in case they're watching, it's something weird that I haven't seen this year. Marcus Stroman, He's a major league pitcher, and he's got 6 pitches, and they're all 30s and 35s. And I've never seen anything like that. I mean, granted, maybe with his 40 stuff, he's just on his way out from being a major league pitcher. And I did try to trade him, and he's going to be making 18 next year, and then he'll likely opt into 18 the year after that. So this has quickly become another bad contract on the Yankees books, at least according to the folks at OOTP. But these really low pitch ratings are not something that I recall seeing. I mean, even with Garrett Cole, it's better in this game than it is in the tutorial that I ran through yesterday. But he's got 60 stuff, supposedly still, but he doesn't even have a single pitch with a 60 rating. And one of the commenters, another one of those comments that I kind of lost, so I apologize for not shouting him out, mentioned that Cal Quantrill from the Rockies was even worse. I mean, look at this. A major league pitcher with a 25 fastball, 20 curve, 30 change, 30 sinker, and 35 cutter. I've just never seen anything like this before, and it's not like guys like Stroman and Quantrill are not relatively proven major leaguers at this point. So I think there might be something a little funky going on with the ratings. I know they've got the more nuanced rating system this year, but there's always a couple little quirks in the game when things are getting started in the early days. And maybe some of you have seen major leaguers with horrible arsenals like this before, but I can't really recall ever coming across it in many years of playing this game. So I tend to think it's one of those little quirks. Something's going a little wrong in the back, and I'm sure the folks at OOTP will figure it out and fix it if it is an issue. So while we've definitely cleared some money off the books, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to trade Stroman. I think we probably just suck it up with LeMahieu for the next couple seasons, or at least next year, before then maybe moving on. The elephant in the room is Stanton, and several of you have talked about this in the comments. I've certainly talked about it in the past. He's out for 4 to 5 months, so he's likely to miss most of spring training. He's fragile physically. I have to think he's going to come back from this injury as wrecked. He was slightly above average offensively for us last year, but that was basically doing nothing but playing DH. And I want to get the guy off our books. He still has 3 more years of guaranteed money, followed by a team option, 32, 29, and 25 million. He's willing to consider trades to about half of the league at this point. And since I know this is going to be a relatively short-term save where I'm probably only playing several seasons, I'm not necessarily trying to build a long-term dynasty here as much as I'm just trying to build a team that can win a title in the next 3 or 4 seasons. So I'm going to have to include our top prospect, Jason Dominguez, the number 29 prospect in baseball, to get him off the books. But I've been working on some deals, and I think there's one with the Padres that is kind of interesting to me. So I'm going to share that with you now. So I've got a monster deal put together with the Padres. We're able to send them Stanton, and we're ultimately able to get it so we only have to retain about 25% of his salary. So that means over the next 3 years, we're clearing up 20-ish million a year. A little less as the contract numbers get less going forward. But it's a significant improvement in our ability to actually hit the free agent market and make some other trades. Now we do, as I said, need to include the number 29 prospect in baseball, the guy who should be our possible center fielder of the future, certainly an outfielder of the future. So I don't love giving him up, but he's really the one that makes this possible. And then the rest of this guys in this deal just let us save a little bit more money. Ben Rice is a pretty solid catcher. He spent the year in AAA for us. I just don't like his negative personality. I do kind of find it funny that the major league catcher who went to Dartmouth is viewed as having low intelligence by the random personalities that I think are assigned in this game sometimes. But with that negative personality and his below average defense, not really someone that I see myself using. Another relatively significant piece is Yorbit Vivas. Think he could be a pretty interesting infielder for us down the line. Hit .331 in AAA Scranton this year for us. But I want to get Stanton off our books, and I don't see Vivas as being a deal breaker. And then the rest of these guys are much less interesting. Zach Messenger, kind of a mediocre starting pitching prospect, negative personality. You can see our scouting accuracy on a lot of these guys across our system is pretty low with the new scout. Agustin Ramirez, he's more interesting to me. Another catcher who was in AAA this year, average defensively, kind of a below average-ish bat that might become average-ish. Don't love including him, but it saves us money for the next 3 years. TJ Rumfield, kind of a replacement level looking type third baseman who was in AA this past year. And then last but not least, Tyler Hardman, a 25-year-old first baseman, another guy that looks like a very borderline major league prospect. So Stanton we want to get rid of. We're getting rid of the top prospect we have in the system, which given that our owner wants us to improve our farm system ranking is probably not the best decision ever. But quite honestly, Dominguez is not going to be factoring in our farm system rating a couple of years from now anyways. And then Vivas, a solid third baseman, and then Rice and Ramirez, who both look like they could be backup catchers at the major league level. So we are giving up a lot to save this money on Stanton, but I just can't stand having him on my roster for another single day. And it's not a perfect trade in return for us because Jake Cronenworth is one of the few people that the Padres offered. I think they did sign him for next year while he was arbitration eligible, and I think they're kind of regretting giving him $9.4 million because it doesn't look like they ascribe a lot of value to him. I was hoping we would put the youngster Wells into our first base spot with the fact that we are moving on. From Rizzo. But if I have to put Wells into more of a utility role, since he can also catch and play the corner outfield, I think that's fine. We only have to deal with Cronenworth next year, so it does offset a good chunk of the savings we're going to have next year. But he is a solid hitter against right-handed pitching, particularly if we have him in a situation where we don't need to play him against lefties. I think he can be a useful bat for us, probably be a little above league average if we pick and choose spots for him carefully and play him primarily against righties. So willing to take him back in return. It's not a long-term commitment. Basically, Cronenworth is going to be one and done with us, and we're basically just giving them one great prospect, one good prospect, and two guys who look like they could be useful major league catchers for them to deal with Stanton for the last 3 to 4 years of this contract. So I know I'm giving up a massive amount, giving up a blue chip prospect who should be a big part of our team going forward. But with the fact that, as I said, I'm opening up, 20-ish million a year by making this trade, it's going to allow us to, in free agency, maybe not this year, maybe next offseason, to hopefully find someone who can do just about everything that Dominguez would have done for us, and we're not going to have to deal with Stanton going forward. Not claiming it's the best decision, but I can't look at Stanton a day more on our team, and the fact that we're getting 75% of his contract off the books makes me feel good about it. Quite honestly, the fact that Cashman tells me it's probably not a good idea makes me feel even better about doing it, because Cashman's the guy who got ripped off by an inexperienced Derek Jeter when he brought this massively bloated contract to the Yankees. What is it, 6-7 years ago at this point? So if Cashman's saying it's not a good idea, I'm thinking it probably is a good idea. So Giancarlo, thanks for some of the really nice years you had in the Yankees uniform. We'll try to forgive for some of the more recent years you've had where you've struggled to hit. Hope you get healthy with San Diego. Hope you do well there. Jason Dominguez, we're going to miss you, but we're going to make this trade. Bring Cronenworth on board. The fans not happy that Stanton is gone. You can see going forward here, we're going to have this is this year. We'll have $8 million on the books next year, 7.2 the year after, 6.2 the year after that. And if for some reason San Diego decides to exercise their team option for 2028, they'll be on the hook for that entire amount. So that now has us in a situation where we've got a lot more money available this upcoming offseason, and it's going to free us up to be more strategic in what we can do in the coming years. So Stanton is gone. So now the contract I worry about most is probably Stroman over the near term. But as I said, as hard as it was to get rid of Stanton, it was going to have to giving up someone like Dominguez as well as some other prospects to get Stroman off the books. And because it's so much less money and it's a year shorter, I think we just suck it up and live with Stroman as a fifth starter or perhaps working out of the bullpen next year. Clearly, Rodon, Cole, and Judge could all go bad, but we're going to assume for the time being that that doesn't happen. That will certainly make things more challenging if those contracts don't work out. So at this point, it's just a matter of getting through these Stroman and LeMahieu contracts, and then we'll feel like we're in a pretty decent position as long as Cole, Rodon, and Judge haven't fallen off a cliff. And speaking of Aaron Arson Judge hopefully not falling off of a cliff, we did spend some time right at the start of the offseason with the development lab, and we set it up to 8 spots, more than the 6 that there normally are. Given that this is not likely going to be a long-term save, I'm using probably a different strategy here than I think I'll be using when I'm investing in players for the long term. 6 of the slots we used on 6 of the best players on the team. We're working with Rodon and Cole to try to improve both of their pitch arsenals. Not going particularly well so far. Given that we've got the long contract with Judge and he's fragile physically, we're working on strength and conditioning with him. Juan Soto, we're working on his 2-strike approach to maybe cut down on strikeouts a bit. It looks like that one's going okay. The youngster Austin Wells, working on his plate discipline, Volpe, quality of contact. And then in the last 2 spots, I am working with a couple of minor leaguers just to see how they work in the player development lab compared to major leaguers. Spencer Jones, one of the better prospects in the organization, working on plate discipline. And then Chase Mobley, a guy who we picked in the draft with our first-round pick this past year. Unfortunately, with the way the timing of the seasons and the draft are set up, the rookie league season was already over by the time we got him signed. But we are going to send him to the lab to work on improving his control, and he's on track with that. So hopefully we'll make some progress with the player development lab and have some interesting things to report. Would hope that both of the minor leaguers are successful. with the major leaguers. If we get 2 out of these 6 where somebody makes some progress, I think that might not be the worst thing in the world. The programs we've chosen, with the exception of Austin Wells and plate discipline, were viewed as relatively hard for them to have success at. So we'll see what happens over the next few months. So I mentioned we had signed a couple of arbitration-eligible players in Clark Schmidt and Trent Grisham. We've also made offers to both of our catchers from last year, Trevino and Rortvedt. Victor Gonzalez, Dennis Santana, and Greg Allen, we're not making offers to any of them. We've tried to trade them all away. There's really no market for any of them. So we are really trying to turn over this bullpen of ours. Don't like the bullpen we had a year ago. Now, there's going to be some holes left. Caleb Ferguson and Clay Holmes were 2 of our better relievers, and Tommy Conley was solid as well. But Holmes is looking for $19 million a year, which I think is absolutely insane. There is a part of me, since he's looking $19 million a year for 3 years, that wants to submit a QO to him. I don't really want to pay $19 million a year for him, even if it's just 1 year. Now, granted, with Stanton leaving, that opens up just about enough money for it to work for us. So I think just in terms of gambling and rolling the dice, I'm going to submit it. As I said, I tend to think a guy who's looking for $19 million a year for 3 years, if you give him an $18.9 million offer for 1 year, is probably going to hit the bid on that and come back to us. But it's more an experiment. It's a new game. Maybe some of the algorithms around this have changed, so I kind of want to learn a little bit, and it'll let viewers learn something too. I tend to think that Holmes will accept this qualifying offer. I hope I'm proven wrong. Talked about Rizzo. $2 million a year is cheap, but particularly now that we've got Cronenworth joining Wells, there's just no spot on the team for him. I looked at the second base market, and we have made an offer to Glaber to bring him back. He's not what Yankee fans thought he might be 5 or 6 years ago, but he's become a pretty consistent and productive offensive player. He's not an ideal second baseman, but honestly, what I'm envisioning with him is we will be moving on from LeMahieu in 2 years at the longest, maybe earlier if we trade him. And he's got a pretty good profile for a third baseman, so I think I'm going to start trying to train him up as a third baseman in spring training this year. And my thought is that perhaps Glaber over the next couple of years becomes our everyday third baseman. And we look to maybe find, whether in the trade market or free agency, a second baseman who's a little better defensively. I would love to bring back Caleb Ferguson, one of the relievers in our bullpen who has a really nice pitching profile. He certainly wasn't dominant this past year, but he is also a 28-year-old lefty without great stamina, a 2-pitch guy. He's definitely a reliever, and he's looking for $11.6 million a year over 4 years. Even as the Yankees, I think that's ridiculous. So we're going to likely let him hit the market as well. So although we're going to have Cole, Rodon, Schmidt, and Stroman back in the rotation, we're just going to have the one hole to fill since we've traded away Cortez. Right now, we've only got about 3 guys who I am sure are going to be back in our bullpen next year, and 2 of them are the lefties, Rogers and Nardi, that we've traded for over the last several months. We've still got Poteet, Beater, Scott Efros, Ron Marinaccio, guys with options that are in AAA. A couple of them will probably make the team, but going into free agency feeling like we probably need to add a starter and at least 2, maybe 3 relievers that we really like for me to feel better about this staff than I feel about it now. Fortunately, I don't think we need to do too much else offensively. If we could bring in one more outfielder, that could help us, especially if it's an outfielder with a bat. As I alluded to, there's a possibility that Bellinger will be available. I think he'd be real interesting. But other than that, I think we're kind of set. We got Cronenworth at first. Hopefully we'll have Glaber back at second, Volpe at short. We'll deal with LeMahieu at third for another year. Cabrera and Peraza probably our utility infielders. Trevino and Rortvet are going to be our catchers, although Rortvet's got options, so we could send him to the minors if we can find someone more interesting on the trade market or free agency. And then in the outfield, it's Soto in left, Judge in right, Grisham in center, and Wells is kind of a first base, DH, corner outfielder who should get some playing time. So pitching and an outfielder are kind of what I think we'll be looking for in free agency. And we've got some money to chase after people at this point. So it's just a matter of who's available and ensuring that we've got a decent scouting report on them in a couple of weeks when free agency goes live. And we've made some progress over the last couple days getting people signed. Trevino signed, Rortvet signed, a bunch of minor league free agents signed, and most importantly, Gleyber Torres inked the deal that we gave him. I'll show you the terms and conditions of it now. He made $14.2 million a year ago. He's going to be making $15 to $17 million a year for the next 5 years. We had to include a player option in the final season, which I didn't love. But I wanted to get the deal done. So he'll be back at second base next year. And that will definitely stabilize things for the near term there. And as I said, my thought is eventually we move him out to third base a year or two from now once we're able to get out from under that LeMahieu contract. And I think it's also conceivable that maybe we move him to third base this upcoming year, put LeMahieu back in that super utility role that he was very successful in for the Yankees 5-ish years ago when he joined the team. But that would require Cabrera or Peraza kind of earning the second base job in spring training, which isn't certain, but it's certainly not impossible either. So I think we've got some options. And we made it to the salary arbitration hearings, and I was wrong on Clay Holmes, and I'm glad I was. He was looking, as we talked about, $19 million a year for 3 years. The QO was $18.9 million. I thought he was going to accept it, and he didn't. So we'll get some draft pick compensation when he signs with somebody else, which is even better. And we've made it to the start of spring training with guys that we ended up dropping off of the 40-man roster, the arbitration-eligible players that we either didn't make offers to or signed for less when all was said and done. We've got almost $62 million to spend, so those of you who have watched me in the past know it's conceivable we'll be investing more in scouting and player development going forward, even though this isn't going to be a long-term thing with us. Still want to ensure that the prospects that we do have in the system develop well, particularly since that is one of Mr. Steinbrenner's goals. But we've got the opportunity to be players in free agency this year with the fact that we moved on from the Rizzo contract, traded away 75% of the Stanton contract, declined another couple of options, and then also traded away Nestor Cortez. So we've gone from very little financial flexibility for this offseason to a situation where we can be major players. And as I said, a starting pitcher, a starting outfielder, and some help for the bullpen are kind of the three needs I think we need to look at. So let's see if anyone who meets those needs is actually on the market. But before we do that, we'll take a brief look at our minor league system, and we're going to have to be spending a lot of work on it. Last year, I didn't really do anything except churn out the most pathetic prospects out of our rookie league team, and we've got a whole new draft class there that didn't end up playing with the timing, but you can see we're short players, particularly at the higher levels of the minors, and when you look at how our minor league teams did a year ago. We were good at the higher levels, but Hudson Valley and high A ball, Tampa in single A, were complete disasters. So we're going to have to spend some time kind of bringing some new talent into our organization and also organizing the players that we do have around our minor league system better this coming off season. So that'll be one thing that we work on. Back now to what I was trying to talk about before I interrupted myself. International free agents, take a quick look here and see if there's anyone who's interesting in investigating. Rodolfo Ortez, left-handed reliever, only looking for 1.2 million. We've got average knowledge of him. Another guy, like some of those guys we got rid of that don't necessarily love the low control, but 24-year-old coming out of Cuba is at least getting worth getting a updated scouting report on, not looking for a crazy amount of money. Alejandro Castillo, kind of interesting also. Another Cuban player. We think he's really solid defensively. The bat, not great, but he will draw some walks, will hit some homers. He's the type of guy that could probably supplant Rortvet. We'll certainly request another scouting report on Castillo. Those are the two most interesting. Now let's see the rest of the free agents. Snell is on the market, Pete Alonso, Chapman, and we do see Bellinger on the market, as well as our former closer Holmes. So some interesting names to consider. Alex Wood, another starter. Teoscar Hernandez, another outfielder. Marcelo Zuna also. So there's going to be some players who fit the profile that we need. You can see I've been trying, well, you can't see this, but I have been trying to scout all the players who I expected would be free agents. Unfortunately, with the turnover in our scouting director, we're not really great in terms of the reports. You can see we're waiting to get some of them back at this point. So hopefully we'll feel better about what we know about all of these players before we have to start making big decisions. Snell is the one who certainly stands out. The stuff is outstanding. Good movement, below average control, normal in terms of his injury proneness. He would certainly be a higher quality lefty than we used to have with Nestor Cortez. Obviously going to be a lot more expensive, but we do have the money to bring him on board potentially, and we only have to negotiate with AI Scott Boras rather than real Scott Boras, which should make the negotiation a little easier for us here. So if we wanted to make a big splash, that would certainly be a direction for us to consider. Would take almost half of the money that we've got available. Relievers, probably not going to be playing at the top end of the market. I don't think a reunion with Chapman makes sense. Ryan Presley, Clay Holmes, the money is just a little too high. Alex Cobb, I don't love his stuff, but we also don't know a ton about him. Waiting for a more updated report. Phil Matan could be a guy that we would bring in. Honestly, with the way our team is currently comprised, he could be arguably a closer for us next year. I don't hate the profile of Paul Sewald either. He wants to be a closer. He's another guy that we could bring on board. Matt Strom also, if we wanted to go for another lefty. But between the guys, and he's looking for more money though, so I honestly think Sewald and Matan, both in that $5 to $6 million range, expensive for a reliever, but we're really trying to revamp our bullpen. We could potentially bring Snell, Matan, and Sewald on board if we got them all for about 40 of the 61-ish million that we have to spend, and that would certainly be a big step forward for our pitching staff. Taking a look at the batters, I mentioned outfield is probably the primary area we need to think about. And Bellinger, does fit a need. He would certainly take over as the starting center fielder from Grisham. That would move Grisham into a role where he's more of a fourth outfielder for us, or a utility outfielder, kind of along with Wells. I think we like Wells' bat more. We like Grisham's glove more. Bellinger put up a 124 WRC plus for the Cubs last year. Only played 105 games, so must have had some time out because of injuries. But he's still normal in terms of his injury proneness. And he would fit. We could bring on Snell, those two relievers, and Bellinger, theoretically, and that would just fit with the money we have. Michael Conforto, another guy who seems to always be linked to the Yankees, looking for a little less money, not quite as good defensively, but was pretty productive with both San Francisco and the Blue Jays a year ago. You can see that I'm waiting for updated scouting reports on a lot of these guys, and actually Teoscar Hernandez and Jason Hayward. I don't think Hayward at 35 is going to be the answer, but we might as well request a scouting report. Teoscar Hernandez had a monster season for the Dodgers. My God, 47 homers, 116 ribbies, 116 WRC plus. He's solid defensively. He's got that power. I feel like there's definitely a bat that can help us. If you've got thoughts on what we should do, would love to hear them in the comments. But it feels like this free agent class lines up reasonably well with what I was talking about just a few moments ago. We kind of need an outfielder, and if he can play center field, even better. We need a starting pitcher, and we need some help in the pen. And I feel like if we were to go after Bellinger, or potentially a Conforto, a Teoscar Hernandez, Marcell Ozuna, Jorge Soler, and Mark Canha, we're waiting on a updated report on him. He was kind of more average offensively and is a little older than some of these other guys. Probably not on the top of the list, but just speaking as I'm thinking, we can bring in a Bellinger. We can bring in Matan. We can bring in Snell. And we can bring in Seawald. And that just about spends the money that we have. We'll still have a little bit of money left after that because we probably will still want to layer in another reliever or two. But if we had Blake Snell, Cody Bellinger, and two good solid relievers to this team, I think we're in a much better position than we were when this offseason started. So I'm feeling a little better about trading away Dominguez to get most of Stanton's contract off the books, because it seems like what we're looking for is kind of available in the market. It's going to be a matter of how many years with some of these guys. Blake Snell, 8 years, $27.5 million. Don't really want to be paying big bucks to another pitcher in their late 30s. We've already got one of those on with Cole, and Rodon's not too far from that. But we can probably get it for fewer years than that. Phil Matan, looking for 3 years at $6 million a year. We can get him for less than that. That's fine. Seawald, I'm guessing, is going to be similar. Only 2 years, $5.5 million. That's more than doable. And then it's just a question of how many years Bellinger is looking for. 7 years, 17 million a pop. He's not what many of us in the Dodgers thought he was going to be 5, 6, 7 years ago, but he's still a very solid defensive center fielder who's been a pretty productive offensive player the last couple years. His rating suggests that he's probably trending towards being more of an average-ish offensive player going forward. So I don't think in a perfect world I want to give him the 7 years. I'd like to keep it shorter, but right now I think I'm very interested in potentially going after Snell, Bellinger, and the two relievers. And as I said, I think we can probably get those guys done and have $8 to $12 million of money still available while addressing our three biggest needs. I think it makes sense. If you've got different opinions, it's always helpful to hear. I'll certainly take them into account before I start making decisions. But I think that's the path that I am considering at this point. And with that, we'll stop the episode. If you've got thoughts on what we should do in free agency, would love to hear them. Also, always interested in hearing your opinion on the moves we made. Were we too risky offering the qualifying offer to Clay Holmes? Did we pay a ridiculous amount to get Stanton's contract off of our books by giving up the top prospect in our farm system, along with several other potentially useful players? And what do you think of the other trades and signings that we've made? Always appreciate the feedback and thoughts and different perspectives. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great night.